After the tone, please state your name followed by the pound sign.
Content sources that the search goes against, and it respects the authorization and the authentication privileges. Obviously it has better search relevancy with over 150,000 different documents being crawled, indexed, and searched. The relevancy is the utmost importance, right? And we also support multilingual. It supports 44 different languages. So we do have documents that are published in different languages, and if you have any discussions or other content that are being published in different languages, you can do that. You can search in different languages. It has a faster and responsive UI. What this essentially means is, if you have noticed, especially when you're searching for discussions, any discussion that has been marked as a correct answer or a helpful answer gets boosted up on the top, and it's a responsive UI, which means that irrespective of which device you are searching on, be it a tablet or a phone, it fits accordingly. And two new features that we will be rolling out, enhancements to the search, is support for type ahead and query suggestions, very similar to how you experience it on Google. And you also will have an option to follow a query. Let's say, for example, you search for something and you don't get any results. So you will have an option to follow that particular query. So whenever there is a result that shows up for that search term, you will get a notification along with the articles that will be relevant for that search. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Ashu to go ahead with his presentation. Ashu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pattabhi. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ashu Saxena. I'm responsible for product management here at Informatica for core data integration products. I have with me Rebecca, who is going to help me present this, and we'll also go through some demos. So hold your questions. We'll go through them in due course. Let's talk about what's going on in your organization today. So if there is one single thing that's changing the landscape of organizations today, it's the data. Data is the single most radical thing that's changing the organizations as we see today. If your organization is not looking at data as a competitive advantage, the time is now. The data is the single most important thing that your organization should be worrying about today. If you have a competition and your competition is doing a better job of data management and data programs, then they have competitive advantage over you. It's highly imperative for you to start to look at the data that you gather, the intelligence that you gather out of it, the analytics that you gather out of the data. It's very important for you to do that in your organization. But while you are doing that, and you have been doing that for several years now, what's starting to happen, and you may have already started to see some signs of it, you may already be feeling the pains of it, is that it's just this vast amount of data that is starting to come into the organizations. Previously, it used to be data that was stored in relational tables. There was the orders, the customers, the stuff that we all have been familiar with over last decade or so. But what we are starting to see now is this interaction data, this social data, this devices data. All of this data is starting to come into the organization and getting blended with the traditional data that we have all been working with, for the organizations to start to make sense of how my customers interacting with me, how are the devices interacting with me, how can I better service my customers, how can I better provide relationships and things of that nature to the customer. So there is just huge amount of data that is starting to flow into the organization. And it's not just the volume of the data, it's also the variety of the data. It is just too complex, and the complexity includes unstructured data. It includes semi-structured data, in addition to the structured data that you are already familiar with. And last but not the least, it just takes too long to deliver. Previously, you could look at an SLA of a few hours, and you had an overnight job, bad jobs that would do the processing, and you would be done. Now, You have to be able to react to the market things that are happening. If somebody writes a tweet about you, you have to be able to respond to it in almost real time, which means you have to be able to process that data, both the interaction data as well as the traditional data that you have about that person, combine them, join them, and being able to respond back to that person almost in near real time. If you're still waiting on IT to deliver that back to business in the usual SLA that you used to have in the old days, that's just not going to scale anymore. Here at Informatica, we do take pride in having built over the years solid data management platforms that are best suited to deal with these problems. With that, I immediately want to jump into what's new and talk about the things that are available on the new version of PowerCenter. This is why we are here, so let's dig right into it. I'm going to talk about the new features in 3 different buckets. I'm going to talk about developer productivity. I'm going to talk about how we are making it simpler, easier, better for you to have visibility into and make more sense of your data. And we'll also talk about how can you enable your business if you are an IT, and how can you enable your business, and if you are a business, how can you enable yourself to self-serve and start to take more control of the data. So we'll talk about the features that are available in the self-service as well. With that, let's immediately jump into developer productivity. And under that context, we are going to talk about a few things. The first thing, and this is really cool, and this is something really close to my heart, is dynamic mapping. But before I talk about that, let's talk about how does it look like in today's world, in your today's mapping. So when you go back to your design interfaces where you're developing your mapping, your mapping looks something like this. When you start to do a mapping development today, you bring in a source, you do some transformations, and then you write that information down to the target. The structures of the source, the ports in the transformations, and the structure in the target is hard coupled, which means the ports are predefined. You get the data from those ports from one transformation to the next transformation and so forth, and eventually you write to the target. But what will happen if the metadata were to change? If the table were to change, or you're receiving files, and here's a real-world example on this. I have a customer who is receiving thousands of these files, literally thousands of these files from their partners, where the partners on and off make certain changes to the data that they are sending. They sometimes change the order the data is being received in. Column 1 becomes column 2. Worse, they sometimes even add columns and assume the consuming party would be able to just identify the data looking at the column header and being able to make sense of that data. Folks who are familiar with Informatica PowerCenter know well that the current mapping paradigm does not flex in that sense. It cannot accommodate for changing schema structures. If you find a new column in the table, it would remain there. We would not be able to accommodate it. So when we started looking at this problem, we said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and figure out what can we do about it. And we came up with the concept of dynamic mapping. Dynamic mapping is a great example where we are trying to solve 2 problems at the same time. One, the mapping itself can dynamically adjust. So if there are changes in the schema, if there are changes in the pattern of the data, if there are new columns appearing, or the column order is changing, or things of that nature, the mapping can self-adjust. It can identify that the source has changed. It will identify that the transformations in the middle can automatically change also accordingly. And the best part is even the target can be changed on the fly. Now this is powerful. This is extremely powerful because, as you can imagine, you don't have to worry about going back into your mapping designer, making the changes, testing it again, and redeploying it so you can get that additional column coming in. And guess what? It was going to change again tomorrow. So this is really powerful in that sense. The other beauty of this is, in use cases where you're doing mass ingestion, simply put, is where you are trying to do a similar processing across thousands of data sources. So for example, you have a large schema which has a couple of hundred or thousands of these tables where you are doing some trim on string columns and making sure your numeric columns are greater than 0 or things of that nature. And then you are taking all of this data and putting into your data warehouse or staging area. Today, you would create about 1,000 of these mappings because each mapping is for one source transformation target combination. And imagine if you have to go back and change any one of these because guess what, the schema changed, or something else about that change where you wanted to bring in an additional business rule, but that business rule is applicable across 1,000 of these tables. So imagine if you have to go back, and reusability only goes so far. You still have to manage and maintain 1,000 of these mappings. That's a lot of mappings to manage. That's a support and maintenance nightmare for you. So what if there was just one interface, one mapping, one template that we were to build, and that we build in a flexible manner. And flexible not just means I can parameterize, that you can already do, parameterize the name of the table, the schema that it is reading from, or the location of the flat file and things of that nature that you can already parameterize. But if you could parameterize the schema structure itself, imagine that. That's something that's really powerful. I mean, if you can just think about that. The structure of the source itself is not predefined. It gets defined when the mapping runs, and the rest of the mapping flexes to accommodate for that structure. So a generic source and a target accommodating for varying schema. And today when you connect ports, you are connecting port in a hard manner. The ports themselves are connecting now in a rule-based fashion. So I can define rules that say whether a particular port or types of ports should be connected or not. Schema definition, for example, string ports should be connected, but decimal ports should not be. So if I find a new string port, it would come in. I can even have the logic that's written in an expression or so be defined in a generic manner. So I can, again, as an example, say that all my string ports should go through a certain trim, for example. So the transformation themselves have that flexibility. And on the target side, as I mentioned, if I find a new column in the source, I can put a business rule during the design time and say, go ahead and alter the target and bring in that additional column. Really, really powerful stuff. And because only one of these exists, at runtime, it can scale to 1,000 of these mappings. So in design time, I have only one artifact, but in runtime, it can scale into, based on the parameters, it can scale to thousands of these mappings. This is available as part of the new productivity package. Okay, let me go to the next topic here. SQL to mapping. So a lot of you guys have been asking for this. A lot of you guys have still been writing SQL, and you should not be. If you are working on a legacy system, if you are migrating data from an existing environment, migrating your data integration routines from an existing environment on an old legacy system into PowerCenter, what you and I do in the past is take that mapping, take that SQL, start a mapping, and paste that SQL into the mapping source qualifier and connect it to the target. Well, there are a few problems with that approach, right? The blob of that SQL is opaque. There is very little intelligence that the system can put into it because SQL can be difficult to understand. It's difficult for me to understand SQL. I'm not a SQL expert, but if I was working in a visual environment, I could enhance that in a much better fashion. It's much more maintainable, much more supportable for me to work in a visual environment as opposed to looking at a SQL blob. So you have been asking for this for the longest time, and now we have this functionality where you can paste a SQL in, and magically we would be able to convert it into a PowerCenter mapping. Let's look at a real example on this. So there is a SQL here that is fairly complex. As you can see, it's got joins going on, it's got a few filter conditions, and it's even got an aggregation going on. And it's so simple to convert it into a mapping and convert it into the right artifacts also. So the join translates into a joiner, a filter further takes in all the filter conditions, and the aggregator is the one that is representing the aggregate clause, and you have your mapping up and running in literally no time. The third topic here I wanted to briefly talk about is the REST provider. And I know a lot of you have been asking for this for a long time, and yes, it's here. So what you already have today, or before this, is SOAP-based interface. So in PowerCenter, you can both consume and provide SOAP-based web services. And what we have with this feature now is ability to provide REST. A REST-based web services is here, it's now. It works in the similar fashion as what SOAP used to work, and you can see some screenshots here. Let's take a look at an example here. So on a web app, I am doing a request submission. That request is a GET method. There is a REST web services running on the application. I'm looking for customer details. I give in a customer ID. Under the cover, the GET equivalent of that mapping runs. It even takes in the query criteria as that customer ID and pushes it down to process that mapping. The data is returned back to the calling application with the filter pushed down. And here goes the JSON response back that is available on the calling application. So similar stuff as what you used to do on SOAP-based web services, but now you have REST-based provider as well. Okay. With that, let me talk about some of the enhancements that we have done to provide improved scalability and things of that nature. So with that, let's talk about enhancements that have been done on the Metadata Manager side. So folks who are using Metadata Manager today, and you would realize this, that as your scale of data is growing, your scale of metadata is growing as well. Actually, it grows even worse because the complexity of metadata is only increasing as the data is increasing. And if you have to take all of that into metadata today, it can be cumbersome, it can be complex, it can be not as performant. So when we looked at that problem, we said, okay, why don't we go back to the drawing board on this, and let's look at this problem from the ground up. And we did. We looked at that problem and we said, you know what, the previous way of storing that metadata lineage information in the repository was not optimal for the volume that we are starting to look at now. And we looked at alternative solutions, and we settled on the graph database, and this is really under the covers. We use a graph database to store the lineage now, and you can see some numbers here. We are seeing upwards of 50 times of lineage performance improvement. Really tremendous. The benefit there is now it will allow you to scale your lineage in a much, much larger fashion. It would be faster as well as scale to the needs that you are starting to see in your environments now. Some of the numbers, as you can see here on the chart here, previously used to take 44 minutes, now less than that, less than a minute here. So much better, much faster here. Talk about Amazon and Azure. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are already either starting to hear about it, contemplating it. Your environments are starting to run out of resources because the data volumes are growing, or your SLAs, you have difficulty meeting your SLAs, and you're starting to wonder, what can I do? Do I procure a bigger, better, stronger machine? And you go back to your IT, you go back to your CIO and CTO and start to talk to them. Let's find a new, bigger, better machine. And how do you do this? And a lot of our customers have been in the same boat, where they are starting to evaluate or even running production now in cloud. And the beauty of cloud is very simple, actually. Next time you need resources, next time you need CPU and memory, next time you need compute power, it's so easy for me to get that because I don't have to go to IT to procure that. It's as simple as a swipe of a card now, and I can have as small or as big of an environment up and running in literally no time, whether I'm working on Amazon or whether I'm working in Azure, Microsoft Azure. It's very easy for me to procure compute power. So what does it mean for you, the Informatica developer, the Informatica administrator, the Informatica operators out there? What does it mean for you if you were to move into cloud, if you were to extend into cloud, if you were to lift and shift into cloud? Well, rest assured, we got your back. And what that means is the same product that you have been running on-prem for several years now, it's the same product that runs just as fine in the cloud environment. You can be confident when you take your PowerCenter installation into Amazon or Azure that it is going to work just as fine. All the performance, all the connectivity, everything that you have been relying on PowerCenter for the longest time continues to work in the cloud environment as well. We have several connectivity options also available. So when you are running in Amazon, you can connect to Redshift in S3. When you are running in Azure, you have connectivity to the blobs. And all editions of PowerCenter are supported to run on both Amazon and Azure. Now, that's an eyeful of a slide, but as you already know, Informatica takes great pride in being able to connect to pretty much any data source that's out there. Hundreds of connectors, literally hundreds of connectors. Whether you are connecting to big data sources, whether you are connecting to traditional ERP, analytics running in cloud, analytics running in on-prem, B2B, structured, semi-structured, unstructured, social media, anything and everything that's out there, we already have a connector for it. And we went ahead and improved some of these connectors further. So we just certified 12c, and 12c both multi-tenancy and in-memory support is available as well. On the Teradata side, we have Kerberos and array support now. And on the Sybase side, we have parallel load support. This is in addition to supporting all the latest versions of these databases. So if you have any questions about any specific connectivity, if you want to know more about anything of that, drop us a note and we would be able to help you navigate through that. And I briefly talked about this as when I was talking about the move towards cloud. So if you are going to cloud, if you are contemplating going to cloud, if you are in cloud already, and a lot of our customers are in cloud already, you have connectivity to both Amazon and Azure, as well as Tableau, for example. A lot of our customers are starting to use Tableau reporting, so we have ability to push data directly into Tableau reports. With that, let me talk about the self-serve aspect of the data preparation or the citizen integrators of the world now. So what I'm starting to see a pattern in the new world is the traditional aspect of a business person writing requirements, handing it off to the IT doing the development for next couple of months, taking it back to the business. It's just too slow. And as we started to look at some of these examples where this interaction data needs to be responded to in a much faster, much quicker fashion, it just does not scale anymore. It's just too slow. So the new paradigm, or the new way of looking at data and doing data integration and data preparation is that the business person himself can start to look at the data, profile the data, look at patterns in the data, look at anomalies in the data. And while he is doing all of that, he is doing it in a collaborative manner. So he's not doing it in silo. Anything a business person is doing on this interface is not for himself, but he is doing it in collaboration with all the other business analysts. And once he is done with that what I call a recipe, or the steps of what he has done, all of that gets recorded. And when it gets recorded, it can automatically become available for the developer to enhance it further and operationalize it. The interface, as you can see, looks kind of like Excel. So as a business analyst, I don't have to know the mapping paradigm. I don't have to know source transformation target way of doing the mappings. I also am not working on a Word document where I'm simply writing the business rules for IT to implement, because I'm actually working on the data itself. And as I'm working on the data, I am discovering more things about data. The system is also making suggestions to me. So if a system sees that there is a mismatch between the city and the state, the system would prompt me that this is something that you can fix. It even suggests me that there are these data sources available that you can plug in and how to improve the quality of the data. Great for productivity, great for self-service, and really speaks volumes for better collaboration between business and IT. This was already available in cloud, in the cloud-hosted cloud. And if you are a PowerCenter customer today, and I'm assuming all of you are, you got it free. All PowerCenter customers get data preparation in cloud for free, no questions asked. So if you want to leverage that, if you want to make sense of that, please do reach out to us. And I'm sure some of you have seen this slide, but I also wanted to give you a perspective of how we layer the products on our side. When we put this stack together, the way we looked at it is the standard edition is something that would quickly get you ramped up, get an environment up and running, give you the basics of doing the data integration, even do some basic profiling, do some rapid prototyping, the stuff I talked about with collaboration between business and IT. And the stuff that's in the border of red is an additional capability that's available to you. So if you are a standard edition customer today, you get partitioning free of cost. You have connectors also. Some relational ODBC and batch connectors are also available to you. In addition, because we know that it is important for you to have a better business IT collaboration, we are providing you free of cost 100 analyst seats that you can immediately start to leverage. If you are an advanced edition customer, then you already are leveraging the enterprise grade, the high availability, the ability to push down. You would also be able to leverage the 50 times performance improvement that we did on the metadata manager. And now we are also throwing in the real-time option. So now you would be able to talk to GMS if you wanted to and get the data in a faster, quicker manner. If you are a premium edition customer, then we are including advanced transformation with ability to process semi-structured and structured data. And there are some additional performance improvements that we have done that we would look at. There are some visualization improvements that we have done on the data profiling side if you are a data profiling customer. I talked about connectivity and several improvements on the monitoring side if you are an operator or an administrator for Informatica. The dynamic mapping, as I mentioned, is part of the add-on, productivity add-on package. So if you have a mass ingestion use case, if you are interested in knowing more about that, dynamic mapping functionality, please do talk to us. That's part of the add-on productivity package. Talking about administration and monitoring, I know a lot of you spend a lot of time looking at Informatica screens, and not just on design time, but also on the operations side. What you are seeing is the new and improved administration console. As you can see, the visualization itself is much improved. It is starting to make sense now. I can see the state of the services in an eye full. I know how many are available, how many are not, how many are disabled. And these are all hot clicks, so you can click on them and being taken to the next level of detail. So all of these are leading into the next level of details. The CPU and memory usage is available to you immediately on the dashboard itself. My services are up and running, my nodes are available, the grid is set up. I can get all of that system usage, the health of the system on the dashboard itself. Now, before I talk about this, let's talk about a problem. And this is really cool because today your jobs are running slow. Let's, for example, or a job has failed, and you looked at that problem and you fixed it, and then 3 months later or 6 months later, something happened again. And you're starting to see a pattern, your job is failing. And you wanted a way to look back on how the system was performing back in time, a few months back, for example, a few weeks back, for example. So you needed a way to almost go back in time. I really like this feature. This is really, I call it the time machine. That slider that you see up here, I can take that slider, scroll it back to a particular point in time, and these dots that you are seeing, or the size of the dot, is indicative of, yes, there was a problem and how severe was the problem. So I can take the slider back in time and everything around it, the state of the services, the events, the status, the jobs that were running, I am going back in time to see the environment, the dashboard, as it existed back then. The benefit is, if I were to look at just one log of one service or one job, I am getting a very narrow picture of what the problem was. The problem typically does not happen in just one place. The problem manifests because there are few things happening at the same time. The job is probably failing because, or failed because there were multiple jobs running that were consuming high CPU, or the disk was running out of space, or something about the environment itself was amiss. And because of that, it was a problem. So instead of looking at the problem in isolation, I am looking at the problem collectively as a combination of services and jobs and everything else around it, and then and only then I truly know what that problem was. So truly remarkable functionality here, really a time machine to go back in time. And that truly is how we provide you business value, with developer productivity in the dynamic mapping, one single template, ability to handle thousands of mappings, ability to have better visibility and management. So we looked at monitoring screen, we looked at performance numbers, we looked at how we can scale into the new cloud environments, and lastly, the aspect of self-service, where business users can now work on the data itself in an interface that's familiar to them, an Excel-like interface, and feed those steps back to IT for IT to continue to enhance it and operationalize it. With that, let me hand it off to Rebecca to show us some of these cool features. Rebecca?
Hi, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. My name is Rebecca Ader. I'm a technical consultant here at Informatica, and I'm going to walk you guys through a couple of scenarios. The first one's going to be a scenario for dynamic mappings, and the second one is going to be SQL to mapping. So the scenario is we have our business users that have been complaining that we have a lot of leading and trailing spaces in the data that we've been receiving. So if you look here, I've done a data preview on this customer table, and you can see there's a lot of leading spaces for all of the names. And then if we scroll over, where you really notice it the most is in the email column. They're kind of staggered randomly. And so we want to create a mapping that will fix that, but we want to be able to reuse it for all of our incoming data, not just for this customer table. So I've already got one built for the sake of time, so let me go ahead and show you that. So we start off with a generic source, and if I look at the properties here, you can see that I'm using a parameter to determine which source object I want to read. So right now the default value is this customer table, and I've got this box checked that says at runtime I'm going to go look at the data object and figure out which columns I'm going to bring in at that time. And that's going to affect the logic within this mapping. So if I go over to this expression transformation, the first thing I've done is I've taken all these ports and I've passed them to this expression. And what I can do is I can right-click on this and edit the input rules. And this is where the mapping is able to self-adjust based on these rules, because right now I'm telling it that we want to take in all of the string ports, and right now that means, you know, name, address, city, state, and so on. But if we bring in new data sources, this could be a totally different set of ports. Let's go ahead and cancel that out. And then what are we going to do to these string ports? So I've added another dynamic port, and what this is doing is it's taking all of those inputs and it's just going to trim the leading and trailing spaces from those input ports. Now you can see that I'm bringing in, all those ports, and then what I'm doing is for each one of those where this logic is applied, I'm giving it an output port, and I'm adding the suffix _out, so I know which of those have been updated. So this is great for our string ports. We solved that problem, but what we want to do is we want to trim those strings, and then we want our output to have all of the same data that our original table had, right? So we've left out all of our non-string ports. But what we can do is we can drag all these ports over to the expression again, and if I right-click here, I can give it a new input rule for this group, and now I have this option selected to include everything else. So here I have party ID, tier, and some other non-string ports that are being included, and these are just going to pass directly through. And then I've got one final modification that I'm making. I just want to tell it the last, the day that these were modified. All right. So now I'm writing these to a generic flat file target. If we look at this target, you can see that it has no columns actually defined in the flat file, in the definition of that target. But what I'm doing is, if I go to the ports tab, you can see that I'm getting those columns from the mapping flow. So whatever is being passed to this is the columns that it will write. So I'm going to go ahead, and I didn't make any changes, so I don't need to save it. I'm going to go ahead and run this mapping, and we can go take a look where it was written on the server. I just have it writing to the desktop. And you can see that it's corrected these. We have all of our columns and all of our data with none of those leading and trailing spaces. But the true power of this is the ability to change the sources, right? So let's go ahead. I'm going to take this parameter, and I'm going to give it a new default. So now I want to take my organization table. So I've got data coming in about multiple organizations that perhaps are my customers. And what I can do now is run this data viewer, and you'll see that organization data coming through. And again, we have these spacing issues. You can see these are staggered. Again, if we look at the cities, these are kind of messed up. You can see they've got a lot of spaces. And I just want to point out really quickly the string ports that it's taking in are now different, as well as the non-string ports. So it's separating those. Earlier we had, I think, 4 or 5, and now we just have the 1 under the remaining ports after you take out all the strings. So let's go ahead and save this, and I'll run the mapping again. And you can see now it's written all of that data, and it's trimmed the strings appropriately. All right, so that's everything I have for dynamic mappings. So you can see, how this can really speed up your development because you're able to reuse these same mappings over and over again. Once you have a problem solved, you can continue to apply that logic to new incoming data. So my next scenario is a very common scenario with many of our customers. I've got a bunch of SQL scripts that I've been using, and I want to translate those into PowerCenter mappings. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, one of the big issues with this is that your developers have to understand, they have to have a really good understanding of both SQL and PowerCenter in order to make these transitions. So you can see here, this is a little bit complicated, but it's not too crazy. Many of our customers have scripts that are, hundreds of lines. This is just 26. But we can kind of break it down and pick it apart. So you can see we're doing a sum. We're pulling data from 2 tables, line item and part table, and we're joining those on the part key. And then we have this huge where clause, which I'm not going to dissect right now. But what I can do is I can actually copy this whole thing and go over to the developer. And I'm going to create a new mapping, and I can do this from a SQL query. So all I have to do is paste it in, go ahead and validate, and then click Next. So here's where we would select our source objects, but I've already got those objects defined, so it just automatically detected those from my project folder. Go ahead and click Finish. And you can see we've got this beautiful PowerCenter mapping. And again, we see the similarities. So we have these two tables, line item and parts table. If we look at the joiner, you can see that join condition. We're joining again on the part key. Over to the filter, this is essentially our where clause. So that was, pretty long and complex, and you can see that reflected here. This is the same logic that you saw a moment ago in the script. And then this expression is putting together that calculation that is inside the sum. So if you look here, we're doing extended price times 1 minus the discount. And then that is going into the aggregator, and that's what we're summing over. If we go down to the bottom, you'll see that. So here we have just a generic flat file target, but this can be, you can delete this and add whatever you need to put here and continue developing however it meets your needs. I'm going to go ahead and arrange this. So what's awesome about this is that you have, all of the logic you've already built. You don't have to throw it away, but you can bring it in here and continue using it, but then you also get the benefits of data integration with PowerCenter. So you have the ability to look at metadata lineage for this. You can have better governance and maintenance of these mappings. And this is going to run much more efficiently than if you just went in and pasted pieces of your code into SQL overrides, which is what many of our customers have resorted to doing in the past. So there you have it. I'll go ahead and we can move on to Q&A.
Thank you, Rebecca. So all the questions can now be posted onto the chat window. So there's a user called Meet the Experts. Please route all your questions to that user, and we'll take up the questions in the order it came. Thank you.
So Patavi, we have a question coming in. I was informed that the dynamic mapping functionality was introduced in developer tool. Is it part of PowerCenter? And it's a common question. I've seen this question come up a few times from a few different folks. And the short answer, folks, is yes, your PowerCenter license includes developer tool. And what you need to do is to add the productivity pack on. So talk to your sales rep, work with them to understand the productivity pack and how do you avail it. And once you have the productivity pack, you would be able to leverage the dynamic mapping feature. But it is part of the productivity pack, and it is the developer tool itself is included as part of your PowerCenter license. I have another question I see here on the chat board. Do I need to upgrade my PowerCenter environment to avail these new features? And the answer is yes. You do need to upgrade your PowerCenter environment. Let me talk briefly about the different releases that are available for you. So majority of the folks, I'm assuming, that are attending today are on some variation of 9. It would either be 9.5 or 9.6. I hope not many of you are still on 9.1. 9.1, you should, if you are still on 9.1, then you should certainly look at the EOL, the end of life, that would trigger in on 9.1. So if you are still on 9.1, please do work with us to understand the end of life policy, so we can get you upgraded and out of that 9.1 environment and get you into one of the latest ones. But if you are on 9.5 or 9.6, that's fantastic. If you want to leverage some of these new features that we talked about today. You should be able to upgrade to 10.0 or 10.1. 10.0 came out end of late last year, and 10.1, R&D team has been working on 10.1 for last few months. 10.1 is just about ready to ship out the door. We are looking at release date of tentative release date of end of this month for 10.1 to become available. So if you are thinking about, if you are wondering, if you are interested in upgrading your PowerCenter environment to the latest, greatest, and avail all these cool features that we talked about today, please do work with us. Please do reach out to us, and we'll work with you to figure out how we can get your environment upgraded into the latest, greatest. I have one more question coming in here. This about the SQL to mapping converter, on how complex the SQL can be. Can there be DB specific constructs, things of that nature? So guys, as you saw, the SQL that I was highlighting on the slide before, it was fairly complex. It had joiners. It even supports inner clauses with filter and aggregate conditions and things of that nature. So if you do have any specific construct, if you have any specific function that you want to see converted into a PowerCenter mapping, please drop us a note, and we would be happy to look at it. We will be happy to work with you to do a proof of concept or and see if that function is already supported or not. I can't speak generically for every single function out there, but please do reach out to us, and we would be happy to look at it on a case-by-case basis. There is one more question I see here. With Premium Edition, is proactive monitoring part of standard package, or it needs to be purchased separately? So if you recall the stacking diagram that I talked about previously, Premium Edition is all about operational confidence. So the two distinct features that are available in the Premium Edition are data validation option and the proactive monitoring. Data validation option provides you a quick and easy way to compare data as it existed before and after. So let's say you are doing code migration from your dev to production environment, and you want to make sure that your jobs are running fine, or you are doing an upgrade and you want to make sure that there is no data anomaly, or you make some code changes and you don't expect any data changes. In all those scenarios, the data validation option would come handy for you to be able to automate instead of having to compare two Excel sheets that we all have done in the past, compare two of these data sheets and put them next to each other. That's the data validation option. The other option there is the proactive monitoring, and proactive monitoring is really cool. Proactive monitoring allows you to, as the name says, proactively monitor your environment and look for patterns and anomalies, and you can define. There are some rules that are available out of the box, and you can define some custom rules where if your CPU usage goes above a certain percentage and your database is running out of space and things of that nature, then the system can send you alerts, and then you can start to define workflows from there. The workflow in the generic sense, not the workflow, but you can start to define workflows from there for you to take corrective action. So alerting and workflow mechanisms can be defined on the proactive monitoring side of it. So to really cool features, and we are adding advanced transformations into the proactive monitoring, which would allow you to be able to process semi-structured and structured data. With that, let me quickly make sure that there is no more chat question here. Do PowerCenter customers move to hybrid runtime environment where dynamic mapping I'm losing that question here. Flip back to the question here. Where dynamic mapping run in MRSBIS, existing PowerCenter jobs run in repository service. It's a very fairly detailed question. Please drop us a note. I may not be able to do justice to this question, but we would be able to help you through any questions that you have if you are thinking about taking your PowerCenter environment, extending it into the cloud. So if you have any further questions, please drop us a note, and we will be happy to work with you on that. With that, I also wanted to highlight that this is the first of more sessions that are coming along the way. So here are a few of the sessions that are coming up. Please stay tuned. If you are interested in taking a deep dive in any one of these topics, whether it is the productivity enhancement that we talked about today, whether it is orchestration between big data and cloud, advanced B2B integration, data integration in real time, very important topics, or the premium edition. I saw some questions come along on the premium edition. If you have any questions on that, please do stay tuned on Data Integration Tuesdays, and you would hear more. Thank you. Thanks for your time today, and have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Ashu, thank you so much. Just before we wrap, I think there was one question. Is this webinar being recorded? Yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing the recording as well as the slides with you in an email. And one more question was, how do we know about the upcoming topics? So we'll also be sharing a link which you can follow, and all the upcoming topics will be posted in there so that you don't miss out on any of these fantastic sessions. So with that, thanks everyone. You guys have a good day and a good night. Bye.